and welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have an amazing guest, Ty Gibson. Ty is the founder of Waterboy Graphics. He is a keynote speaker, small business owner, and entrepreneur. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome Ty Gibson.
Thank you, Courtney. I'm excited. I'm so excited to be here. I love your energy, though. I got to say that right out of the gate. I love your energy.
Thank you so much, Ty. I am all about the energy, and we are certainly going to get into a positive mindset, but I would love to disclose to the listeners, they are in for quite the podcast episode because alongside all of your success in your career, you have certainly endured some challenges that include living with type 1 diabetes and 3 organ transplant surgeries. Ty, I just want to say too, when I was doing the research for this conversation, you truly are. You are an inspiration to so many. But Ty, I want to jump right into this conversation right away. So if you could begin with an introduction and a background of yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks again. Like I said, I'm excited to be here, but I don't look at it as having a lot of adversity. I think, it's just life sometimes is the way we look at it. But as we go back and start talking about it, I'm like, wow, we got through these things, right? But yeah, I'm again, Ty Gibson, and I grew up down in Southeast Texas. I'm a Texas boy. And, growing up, my dad was one of these guys that's like, Ty, just dust it off. You'll be okay. Put a Band-Aid on it. Nobody wants to hear your problem. Right. So at the time I thought, man, that's a little harsh, but you know what I realized, and I hope this makes sense to people, but sometimes we're being prepared at early ages, and some of these adversities that we go through is just it's really setting us up for our path ahead. I didn't know, but looking back on it, that was really helping me to prepare for this stuff that I've gone through. So growing up down there, at the age of 8, I was diagnosed with juvenile diabetes, as you mentioned. And, now this is where I got to disclose a little bit. I'm a little older. This was in the 70s. This was in the late 70s. So the technology was not quite there like it is today. So, juvenile diabetes, I was pricking my fingers, trying to get blood, get my blood sugars. I was really, even before that, it was all urine tests. That's how you would check and what was crazy is I laugh about this. It would say when you would do that, it would say you're between this and this. It wouldn't even give you a number. It was just, you were in a range. So again, I say all that because the technology was just kind of to show you the technology back then was not there. So brittle diabetes, 8, but my dad and my mom just continued to let me be a boy. I like to hunt and fish, and I played baseball and sports. And so we did everything. I did everything a normal boy would do. My brother and sister were, I was right there with them doing everything. I never thought any different. Now, I did have a lot of struggles though, because my blood sugars were bouncing. And so over the years, at the age of 10, they brought me over to Houston, Texas, to a Texas Children's. And there was a doctor there doing some research on an insulin pump. They were putting insulin inside of a chemotherapy machine, a syringe pump, and I'll get insulin throughout the day versus give it all the injections. So I went over there, and sure enough, I was a candidate to try this out. So I wore this pound 9 ounces. It was like a box that I wore on my side. I still to this day get people that from back home that'll go, "Oh, you were the guy that wore that box on the side." And I'm like, "Yes, that was me." But anyway, so I wore this insulin pump, and it was a lot of research, right? It was a lot of back and forth and learning all the detail. The pumps got smaller over a couple of years, and then they got, the technology got a little better, and they got a little better. So, and then I'm going to fast forward. I went to college, and again, through high school, I played sports, and I continued playing sports, and it was just a normal kid, right? Your lifestyle changes through college, and and all that, right? The sleeping's different, the things you do. I mean, it was a little bit different for challenging for a diabetic. Um, and I was, I'm not going to sit here and say I was not the perfect. I'm not the poster child for a juvenile diabetic. I didn't do everything I should be doing, but because I wanted to be that normal kid. I wanted to fit in. I kind of didn't want to, I didn't want to have to be the guy to go out in the middle of the evening and, walk outside and take an insulin shot or check my blood sugar, or I just didn't want to do that. So I always was trying to fit in. But anyway, fast forward at the age of 30, after I was out of college, I'm just exhausted. And I go in and the doctor says, "Hey, I hate to say this, Ty, but you got kidney failure." He said, "Your kidneys aren't working." And he said, "But here's the problem. You have such brittle diabetes that if we just put in a kidney, well, then your diabetes is just going to continue to really churn these kidneys, right?" So he said, "But there's a research being done in Baltimore, Maryland, at the University of Maryland, that they're doing dual transplants where they'll do a kidney and a pancreas transplant at the same time." He said, "But we got to get you out there to see if you're a candidate." So sure enough, I fly out to Baltimore and I end up being a candidate for this. And again, it was a research. At the time, though, there had four of these surgeries and two of them were successful. And so it was, I was a little leery on what do I do, but I knew I felt really bad and I knew I didn't want to go through the dialysis and all that stuff. And so I was trying to really make a hard decision. And my mother, who was 60 at the time, said, "Ty, I don't know what the doctors are going to say, but God gave me two kidneys and one of those is yours if they will be willing to let you have it." And I said, "Well, Mom, I'm very thankful, but we got to go through this blood work to make sure it all matches." And sure enough, Mom went through it and she was a match. So I was so excited that my mother, who was 60 at the time, I was going to get to receive her kidney. But as you know, if we're doing the dual transplant, we've got a pancreas, and then we have a kidney of my mom, but I have to get a pancreas, which comes from a deceased donor, an organ donor. So there has to be obviously a tragic situation um, to happen for me to receive that, which is it was really hard for me to kind of think through that process because it's just because something really bad has to happen for you to receive this organ. So at the time, living in Austin, Texas, I have a 6-year-old daughter, and so a lot of really hard decisions were being made of like, man, this is going to be hard. When I get that call, what's going to happen? So 8 months of going through this, I waited and I waited and I did blood work every week because you got to make sure you're not sick or everything is right when you do get the call. So you got to continue to do blood work every week. And so, I go through that, but man, I was working and it was so hard, Courtney. I would go to work till 6. I mean, I'd go to work and I'd come home by 6 o'clock. I'm in bed because I was so tired. I didn't have the energy to go. And that was unlike me because I'm always somebody that likes to go, go, go. But it was so hard. And so I went through that. Now finally, I didn't want to do dialysis because the doctor said, if you don't do dialysis, there's a better chance of the organ working. And so I was doing everything I could not to go to dialysis. I finally go to the doctor and I said, "Man, I can't go anymore." So they put the stent in for dialysis and we're going to get ready that next week. Well, that Sunday night, it was Super Bowl Sunday. I'll never forget it. The phone rings at midnight and I look at it and I know my phone rings at midnight, it's not a normal. So I look at it and it's the Baltimore number. So I knew exactly who this was. They're like, "Ty, there's been an accident and there's a pancreas that matches you. There's an organ that we're working on right now that looks like it's going to be a good match for you. We need to get you mobilized because again, I'm down in Texas. We got to get to Baltimore." So I call my mother, who's 5 hours from me in Texas. And then we get going and we mobilize to Baltimore. But it's like the movies though. You hurry up and wait, you get there, and then you wait on have signed papers and get ready, get all the getting prepped. But in this surgical room, Courtney, it was crazy. I had myself was in the middle. They had a team working on the organ, and then they had my mother and another right beside us working on her. And it was just a miracle going on. I mean, it was a pure miracle. But 16 hours later, I received the organs. And I wake up in recovery and my mother is sitting beside me in a wheelchair. And it was just amazing to me because my biggest fear was my mother was 60 and I didn't want anything to happen with her, right? And I wanted her to, but she went through the laparoscopic surgery, which was amazing. And she was able to be right there beside me when I woke up, which was really nice for me to see. But it was a really hard road. That really started this. They said, Ty, if you can get through the year, 1 year, you're going to feel amazing. And so, and I tell people, I felt good, but I also was on 65 meds a day. I was taking 65 pills a day. And then I was taking obviously IVs and all these things. So I felt fine coming out of surgery. I felt really good. But I will tell you, my color was better. There was just a lot going on. But well, here's a really cool thing. This is what's really cool. The surgeon comes in and says, "Hey, during the surgery, Ty," he said, we were sewing up your kidney for your mother's kidney into you, and it started working. So it was so challenging trying to finish up the attachment part of it, which I thought was just another amazing thing that it worked so fast because some of them are delayed coming, starting to work. So this one was ready to work. So it went right to, it was amazing how fast that started. So, my kidney started functioning as I was in surgery. So, which was really cool. And so we get through the surgery, I get through that. And, it was, we spent a month in Baltimore just trying to make sure we get all the meds regulated. And sure enough, after that year, Courtney, I felt like a new person. I really did. It was amazing. And I want to stop right here for a second because I want to, and just cut me off, Courtney, if I'm going too long, but I'm trying to tell it gets better. The story gets better. So, I always say, we all have challenges, right? We all deal with something. We're all dealing with something. But what I want to say is on the other side of whatever we're dealing with is some amazing things. We may not look at, sometimes we're in the ditch too deep or whatever, that wall looks too tall, but I can tell you guys, it's worth the climb. And here's my story for the climb, right? On the other side of that, after I got through this, I was able to get married. I was able to adopt my second daughter. And I wish I had a picture, damn it. But it's, I'm going to start having that picture because my family's amazing and they're my pride and joy. But, and then I was able to open up a business. And I'll tell you, without someone being an organ donor, I would never have been able to do that. So I've never been able to meet the family of the organ donor, but I just know how grateful and how thankful I am because it changed my life. And I always think, I look at my daughters and I think, man, I would have never been here if it wasn't for whoever this person was. And so I'm just very thankful of that, but it keeps getting better. So let me keep going. So we go through that. And again, I was able to open a business and get married. And Crystal, my wife, has just been an absolute blessing to me in many ways. And she was my business partner. We both left our corporate jobs and did our businesses together and just my rock. Right. And so I get through all this and then organs don't last forever. So my pancreas lasted for 12 years, which was really cool because I didn't have diabetes for 12 years. People don't, and then I hear people say, "Oh, we have a cure for diabetes." Well, they're getting there with this islet deal, right? But right now we don't truly have especially back then, we didn't have anything close to a cure for diabetes. But I didn't have it for 12 years. My mother's kidney lasted for 20. So that brings us to 2019. I've got the business going, my daughter, all these great things, right? I'm, and my kidneys fail. And so immediately they put me on dialysis because when it failed, it just shut down. And so I'm on dialysis 3 days a week. I'm getting the dialysis at 4:30 in the morning until 9. And then I'm going to the office and I've got like 45 plus employees at this point. And so I'm the face of our company, right? So I'm going in And I'm trying to act like, again, this is my dad who just nobody wants to hear my problems and, put a Band-Aid, dust off. So I would dust off every morning after dialysis. And I would go in there and act like as much as I could, nothing's wrong, and try to be, rally the troops and tell them how and love on them and just try to encourage them. And so that was hard, and it got harder and harder and harder. But my wife came to me and said, "Hey, your sister's going to be a match." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So I was so excited. My sister ended up matching me, and I'm going, "Oh my gosh, I don't have to go through this much longer." My sister, so she's going through the process. And then all of a sudden, right at the end, they come back and said, my sister's name's Gia. Gia is not going to be a match. And because something with the filtration. And so we didn't want to take any risks. So we didn't, so as sad as I didn't want to take any risk on that. So the beautiful thing was my wife comes to me and goes, "Hey, I cannot watch you go through this anymore. You can tell you're just really struggling." And so she said, "I want to go in, I'm going to donate my organ. So in return, someone can donate that matches you." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that is amazing." So she goes in, and I get a call that afternoon, and she's in tears. And I'm thinking like, what has happened? Did they have an accident? What's going on? And so she calls me. She says, "Ty, you're not gonna believe this." She says, "I'm a perfect match." And I'm like, "What?" And so come to find out, my wife, who thought she was a different blood type, but she and I matched perfectly. So just to get to the end of 6 weeks later, I received my wife's kidney 5 years ago, and it has been the best 5 years of my life.
Ty, this is an incredible story. I mean, first off, we start this podcast and you're talking about my energy and my positive mindset. I mean, I am going to put this compliment right back on you because it really is. It speaks so much to your character, to your positive mindset. And that's like my next question, leading in my next question was everything that you have gone through. Like you're telling this story, but let's be honest, like there's always that journey in between, the long days, the long nights. How were you able to possess that positive mindset through it all? Like what held you what made you keep going? Like was there an influence in your life? Like what was it?
Well, uh, yes, and I will tell you this: my daughters and my wife is really my, um, I think we all have a why, right? We all have that why, and people hear that why, but I truly that I wanted. Not only did I want to be there for them, I wanted to show them how when we run into adversity that we can get through it, because I knew they're going to run through adversity too in their lives. And I hope I was being, I was trying to be the right role model for them, but at the same time, I was fighting to be there with them. So,
That is incredible. And the reason I bring that up is because you had certainly mentioned it, but we all go through challenges and by no means like in your experience, I mean, that is like one in itself, but to be able to hear you speak about your story with such an uplifting and just really like positive outlook on everything, even as you do reflect, I think that is absolutely remarkable to go through all of that adversity and still to have like so much energy, not to go back from the start, but it really is incredible, Ty. And I'd love to go back to the beginning. So you said that you grew up in Bridge City, Texas. And I'm curious from those younger days, surrounding, like you had mentioned your parents' influence on you, specifically your father, you were mentioning. But what were maybe some lessons that you learned in your childhood that you would be able to kind of pull through life up to this present day?
well, and I'm going to go back to that story of the way we were raised, right? I mean, I just, I really believe, God had a plan, right? And he really prepared me through my parents' upbringing, but it was really just, I mean, dad was kind of a zero nonsense type guy, right? And he just, um, he really helped me just to understand that you can push through anything. He was a guy that just, man of few words, but he let me know it was up to me if I wanted, you know, to be able to play on the little league baseball team because I need to do the right things, make the right choices. And so he was always real big about that. You know, and so I really learned that, a lot of decisions and a lot of the paths that we're going to take were really up to ourselves. And I think that's what's really helped me understand. And then and those were the fun days, but also when it get a little cloudy outside, right? When things are happening, it still was up to me how I was going to get through those days. But I think that was a lesson that was taught early on.
That's so true because I always do. I love starting from the very beginning, laying that solid foundation of how, if it's our parents' influence, but how we are able to go through our life. And, in some cases, we were speaking about it obviously before in your story, but like there's certainly successes, but then there's also challenges. And how do we have that positive mindset to look through the adversity and still see light at the other side to keep
Right.
us going? So, thank you so much for sharing that. And, in relation to not just the challenges, but you also have built like successful businesses. As you were going through these challenges, you were also running two independent businesses. So I really want to focus on this sense of like balance. How are you able to balance everything, even including family as well?
It was hard. It had its difficult moments, but I've always been, I think my wife and I both have been really good about like trying to shut it off. I mean, it was funny. She's better at it than me. But coming into our neighborhood, we have this little little brick entry type thing. And she told me one time, all right, when we pull into that brick entry, work stops. And so, I mean, even if I was in mid sentence, she would make me stop. And so that was kind of our rule, right? When we pulled into our neighborhood, family began and work stopped. Because as you know, a business owner, it really never stops, right? In your mind, there's calls, there's things going on. But we were very intentional that that's where we left, that's where we left work. And then we would pick it up there on the way out in the morning. So, yeah, it was really difficult. And there were times where we had to sacrifice because I think small business owners, you have to, you have to, but you also have to be very intentional that how important your family is. Go back to your why, right? So, because at the end of the day, you know, that's what it's about. And so, but we had our our times, and I'm not going to say we every night we were able to leave it at that brick entrance. There were times that if there was an emergency or something comes up that we have to go. But I will tell you this: I don't miss a ball game. I don't miss practices. I don't miss anything. Now I may be over on a phone sometimes in the corner at practice, but I don't miss them. And because I know even now, my um, my youngest adopted daughter is 15 and involved with sports, and I know that's coming to an end. So I want to enjoy every ounce of it I can.
That's so true. And I really, really like that, Ty, how you and your wife have kind of a landmark. As soon as you enter those little brick, maybe development entrance, that work stops. And I think that's so true because especially today with all the technology, we are so connected. Like back then, I even think about like growing up with school, different social activities outside of school, like you would never even know about it, but we are so connected. And I think there comes a point where you have to be very intentional about shutting off work and then spending time with family because that time can never be brought back again.
That's
So
true.
I think you have brought such good points up, just in relation to life. My next question is, going through these challenges and being able to overcome this adversity that you've experienced in your life, like, was there Was there a particular like moment, or was it maybe just over time that you were starting to reflect and thinking, wow, maybe my story, if it was heard out there becoming a speaker, this could inspire others? Was there a moment, or was it kind of just over time that you would think, wow, I really
Well,
do think the story could help others?
what? I've never thought that. Again, being raised from Southeast Texas, I thought nobody wants to listen to Southeast Texas boy, but I, I, it was over time. But I'll tell you how the story went. It was really pretty interesting. When I was in dialysis and I was working, and my wife had a family. It was an extended family reunion, and we were very involved with families, and so. But she said, "Ty, would you mind sharing your story?" And I'm like, well, if they want to hear my problems, because again, that's the way my mind was shaped, right? If they want to hear my problem. And so I did. And several of them gathered around and started listening. They're like, oh my gosh. And these are cousins and stuff that we knew for a long time, but they had no idea that I had gone through all this. And so that night driving home, like 4 or 5 of them texted and said, hey, thanks for sharing. You know what? We're going to go sign up to be organ donors. And, I kept driving. My wife was asleep, as she usually is on the drive, right? And so, I had a lot of time to think, and I thought, how selfish am I if I can really help people by just telling my story, And then I thought about my dad, and I thought, what a wonderful man, and he did everything right. But I think I may have to disagree with him on this one as far as being able to really, maybe they do. Maybe if I can help somebody, maybe this Southeast Texas boy can help somebody. And so I mean, that's where the kind of the light went off. And I reached out to the Texas Organ Sharing Alliance, and they're like, oh my God, Ty, yes, we would love to have you share the story. So I started sharing my story, they asked me to come here, and then all of a sudden it just started kind of going. Well, then I again was like, I mean, the people were signing up to be organ donors when I was talking. I'm like, gosh, Ty, why won't you? I mean, so now I was like, I tell people now, if I catch you in the elevator long enough, you're going to hear about organ donation. So I mean, because now I'm on fire for it, because I want to help others. And I will tell you this, part of it is because it was when I sat in that dialysis center, and I would be around this room and all these people in these chairs, right? And you go in every day and you got the same people there. And then you show up the next time, then every other day you go, and the next time you go and somebody's not there, and you find out they didn't make it. But it was because there's not enough organs or whatever the case is, right? They didn't find a match. So, if I can simply tell my story and help people be organ donors and hopefully help save somebody in one of those chairs, then it's worth me talking. And then the beautiful thing was when, about a year and a half ago, uh, there was a group came to Crystal and I, my wife, and said that they wanted to purchase our company. And I was like, really? That's amazing. So we kind of went back and forth for a while, but we sold the company, and I'm still involved, and I still do a lot of work with it. But I was asking my wife, I said, what am I going to do with my free time? And she says, well, I know what you should do with your free time. I'm like, what? She said, you ought to go tell your story more. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I want to do. So, um, and that's what I've been doing, Courtney. That's what I've been going around trying to tell me. And so, I mean, I know that was a long-winded answer to your question, but that's really kind of where I started. I didn't had no idea I would have anybody listening to me like that. So it's been great.
That's incredible. And I really do. I mean, when we were first speaking, our first introduction, your story, I mean, really, like I was reflecting afterwards as far as the adversity that you've been able to overcome and how even like the timing, like you were talking about like different miracles that were starting to happen. Like the timing had to be perfect. And even as you mentioned now, with Waterboy Graphics, when you sold it off, it was kind of opening that new door to the next chapter of being able to speak about your story now, which I think is remarkable. I mean, sometimes I feel like when I look at different chapters that I've gone through in life, I would get really anxious of what that next chapter was going to be. But as I reflect, like as you were speaking, it's truly incredible the timing sometimes that allows us to go in a direction. Just like you said, you'd already been contemplating, thinking about this, you experienced it with your own family, saying, like, wow, Ty, like I would love, like, thank you for hearing this story. Like, I would love, like, for more people to be able to hear this. And so I think this is, it teaches so many lessons, like, through your experience, just as you're speaking, but I could go in so many different directions. I'm so excited for this conversation. I would love to jump into, like, mindset. You have this mantra called no options mindset. So, Ty, what is that all about and how did that come about?
Well, I because I had so many people saying, "Ty, how do you get through this? And how do you get through that?" And then, "Oh my God, you went through that too." And and then the business, there's a lot of things we went through. I mean, in business, I'll tell you real quick, we opened our business in '06, right? Guess what? In '08, we had the financial crisis, right? And so and my wife and I both had left corporate jobs, and we just said, we didn't have an option. There was no plan B. We got to make it work. But but and then there was a lot of things throughout this adversity that just kept talking about, we just got to stay mindset, got to keep push through. But I look back on these and I kind of dissected it down, and it came to, you're right. I have a 3-step process that I do because I, the, think positive thing, I think is just a big blanket, right? And when people are in the ditches, and somebody says, what do I need to do? They don't, you can't grasp be positive. It's too broad of a statement, right? And so I boil it down a little bit, and I could go into hours for this topic, but the 3 steps. So the first thing I say is when we run into adversity, we want to look at it and say, are we going to grow or are we going to die? That's step 1. And that's what we do. Are we going to grow or die? And when I say die, I don't mean death. I mean letting your dreams go, letting your purpose go, letting that business plan just fade away, or whatever your dream was, right? So are we gonna let that go? Or are we not? Right. And number 2 is hope or despair. That's how we think, right? Hope or despair. When I say hope or despair, I want to dive into that. Hope is find the silver lining, find the positive, right? We can despair. You don't want to be the whole victim thing, right? Why did I have diabetes? Why was I the one that had the transplants? Why did when we opened the business in '06, the banks, why did it just have a financial crash? I mean, all these things, right? You could just poor pitiful me. And that's how we think. You got to think positive. You know, we got to think, the positive thing is, and I used to tell Crystal about this, when '06, when we opened, I said, thank God it happened so fast because we didn't have a lot to lose at that point. Well, now we can build from here, so you got to find the positive, right? And then number 3 is humor or drama. And that's how we think. And so, and when I talk about that, sometimes the way we think, you gotta sometimes just sit back and go, holy cow, this is a lot. But you know what? Me and my brother, or me and my sister, somebody, we're out, and my wife, we sometimes just gotta make light of it. Like, oh my God, yeah, I'm going through another surgery. As my brother, he'll tell I've got, and this funny story is when they tell you, and this is, you'll laugh at this, but when you do a kidney transplant, they don't take them out. They leave kidneys in. So he always tells me, Ty, you're full of kidneys. And and I'm just, and it's kind of, it's just kind of funny, but I mean, you got to find humor in our challenges, right? And that's how we think. So when we do, I'm going to go back through this. Grow or die is what we do. Hope or despair is how we think. Humor or drama is how we talk. And if you take those 3 steps and whatever it is you're dealing with, it will help adjust your mind into a positive thinking.
I am so happy that you have broken it down that way because without a doubt, like, realistically, when we're going through difficult times and somebody says, just like you are mentioning, but be positive, you're like, what? Number 1, how do I do that in this moment, right? But at the same time, the ability to break it down exactly the way that you did, when you speak about like kind of one end of the spectrum to the other, it really is like I've always spoken about positivity in general, but how it's a choice, like you have a choice every morning. We all go through like different challenges, different issues arise in our life, but how do you react to that? And I think it goes directly as to what you were just speaking about. And I just love how simplistically you lay that out as far as just kind of guidelines to kind of live life by. So that is fantastic. And you had mentioned, of course, how successful your business has been, Waterboy Graphics. But I want to know, what exactly is Waterboy Graphics? How did it
Well,
come about?
well, it's really cool. I mean, and it's funny too. I'm gonna go back to another dad story. Dad used to ask me, he says, "Todd, what are you gonna do with a graphics degree, graphics design degree?" Because I love graphics, but I didn't know what to do with it. So I got a graphics degree and a marketing degree. But I had the opportunity to go to work at Disney, and so that was really cool. I go over on the college program and I do that thing, and then I got the opportunity to stay there and work, and I loved the graphics and on the marketing side of it. But I wanted to do. I love sports. I'm a sports fanatic. I love sports. I played sports, but I mean, it doesn't matter what sport it is. I enjoy it, and so I was like, how can I pull these two together? Right. And so when I came back, that's where I started the business. And it's really a printing and a sign company is what we did. But what I did is I immediately went into the sports world. Right. And so what Waterboy does is we go into athletic stadiums now and we wrap stadiums, windscreens around fields and some of the big stadiums that you guys all watch on Saturdays and Sundays, we've had the privilege to do the graphics in them. So it's been really fun. We do a lot of high schools, we do colleges, and we did some professional stadiums. So it's really fun now to be able to look back and go, wow, that's kind of cool to see graphics and sports coming together and really taking it to that level. So it's been an amazing thing, but it took off really, Courtney. I mean, I wasn't sure exactly where it would go. We found a niche and it just took off. And Under Armour picked us up really early. And so I don't know how much time we got, but I want to tell you a quick story about that one. It was really fun. It was really fun. So um I I was doing these graphics and when we first got started, there's like six of us on the whole team. Um, anyway, they were spreading. I was a sales guy. I had multiple hats, but I was out talking to everybody. And so there was a school in Dallas, Texas that we had did work for, and the coach calls him and he says, Under Armour's about to start sponsoring high schools. He said, but the graphics that you've done here, I really like. Would you be willing to meet? Can I introduce you to Under Armour? And I'm like, oh, I love that, coach. I mean, love it. Joey McGuire, who is now the Texas Tech head football coach, at the time was this high school coach I'm talking about. So Joey sets up a meeting, and he and I meet with Under Armour, and so I'm talking to Under Armour, and they go, I'm telling them what they're doing. So I'm excited, thinking we're going to get to do Joey's high school, the Cedar Hill in Texas, and so I'm talking to them, and Under Armour says, "Hey, well, what we do is we do the top 30 schools around the country. Can Waterboy handle that?" And I kind of took another breath, and I said, "Absolutely." And so after the meeting, I went out into my truck, and I sat there for a few minutes, and I didn't know whether to scream celebration or cry, but it was because I had no idea how I was going to handle this, but it took off, and it was just an amazing. I mean, it's really what launched Water. But I laugh because that next week, I'm in Seattle and I'm measuring Waterboy. We're Waterboy, and there's like me, I'm the guy, right? And I'm measuring and all this, and Under Armour calls me and goes, Ty, whoever your rep is in Florida, can I get him? I need him out at the I think it was St. Plaintiffs or one of the schools out in Florida, one of the big ones. But anyway, and I said, "Oh, absolutely." And I'm calling the office. "Hey, y'all get me a flight to Florida." I mean, I was buying clothes in the airport, I think, just to try to keep up with. But it was an amazing time, and we got to hire people. We got them under, and so really, that's how Waterboy launched. And now to this day, we've got a huge team, and now we have 3 plants in different facilities, and so it's just been an amazing story. It's been a lot of fun.
Hi, that is an incredible story. And I want to let you know that as you were speaking and you said that you were reflecting, like, how are we going to do it? I know how you get through it. It's the no options mind to really like when when you kind of like open up the lens, just like you said, I just want to reiterate that you started this company in 2006. The recession would hit roughly about like 2 years later, but how you were able to overcome that adversity, and then the story that you just spoke about, like linking up with Under Armour and how these opportunities would just blossom. My question to you is, like, for entrepreneurs right now, maybe just started, maybe in the midst of maybe some challenges they're overcoming, but could you offer advice? I'm just going to kind of open the mic here to you, very generally, very broadly speaking, but some advice for entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. I mean, part of, I mean, owning your own business is probably the hardest thing you'll ever do, as you hear, but it's also the most rewarding thing you'll ever do. Um, First of all, so I always encourage people. It's hard. Nothing is easy, but it is so much fun and so rewarding. But my thing is sometimes go look in the mirror and go, what am I going to do if it doesn't? If I do give up, what does that look like? Right? Don't always look at how hard it is ahead, but look how hard it is if you don't. Right? Sometimes we got to look at what happens if I don't make this work. And that's kind of where the no option mind comes in. I mean, I don't want to, I don't, I don't want to do what I was doing before I chose to get into the business, right? Or but with my plan. But what I would encourage people is it's worth the fight. If you had enough energy and thought and all the work you put in to get started, don't give up on that. It's that grow or die. I mean, don't have an option out. I think sometimes we're so and I mean, I'm sorry to say this, but we're too soft, right? We're too soft, and we let ourselves out when we shouldn't, and I don't know if that answers the question, Courtney, but that's kind of the way I look at that.
No, absolutely. And I like how you kind of paint that picture that, in business in particular, I think that would be, I even tell myself the same thing, that if I'm thinking about an idea and it's, more of a calculated type risk, not just like on a whim, like, oh, let me just try this. But I really do. I think of the thought of what would I feel like if I did not do that, like 5, 10 years down the road, looking in hindsight. I could not live with regret. Like, I would rather try something and fail at it than wonder what if the rest of your life. And so I think that is absolutely excellent advice for an entrepreneur in various different spots. Maybe they're just starting, maybe they're in the middle, maybe they're even contemplating about starting for that matter, right? But I want to kind of pivot here. And this speaks to your character. You are heavily involved in like community service, like public service. And I was curious, like, what particularly motivated you to transition into business leadership, then into public service?
Well, I think the bottom line, I love people. I mean, people energize me, right? I mean, like, when I'm around people, it re-energizes me, and um, I want to help where I can. I feel like, again, um, and I don't mean to get too, I mean, but God's kept me around for some reason, and I don't know, trying my best to make sure. And then here's another thing that kind of goes deep in me is I've been given life by people, and I want to make them proud of what I'm doing with the gift they gave me. You know what I'm saying? My mother, my wife, and then this precious person, whoever it was. And so I feel like I've got people watching me, making sure that I'm doing the right things and making the right choices. And so I feel like I've got to live up to
I think that's absolutely incredible because I think like once you have reached, I mean, literally the pinnacle, just like you said, you were able to sell off your company. So that's where that business leadership is. But then to be able to kind of open up that lens into really just focus on like serving others, I think is so powerful and can be so fulfilling at the same time.
yes.
So thank you for taking us, like walking us through that journey. And my next question here is, we've been speaking about it throughout this podcast episode, but how life really it could provide us those ups, the successes of life where we celebrate, and at the same time the challenges. But knowing that each success and each challenge really is temporary. But my question to you is there any type of like daily habits that have helped you through, almost like maybe remaining humble during those successes, but then also too on the flip side, being able to work through those challenges? Like any particular daily habits you could offer our listeners?
I've learned over the years. I mean, early on is in my entrepreneurship. I ran wide open, right? I mean, I was foot on the gas. I mean, and I still believe hard work is is critical. But as I've gone, we also have to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, right? And so what I've realized over time is I've got to carve out time so that I can be ready and be in a position to help continue to grow, right? And so I do. I mean, in the mornings, I'm an earlier morning guy, so I like to get up and um, I like to have some quiet time for and as prayer time, meditate, whatever that is, right? Each morning, but I just like with a cup of coffee. I like some quiet time, and so I do that, and then also just sometimes throughout the day, you've gotta stop and and take time to really for yourself, right? I mean, for especially as a diabetic, because we've got to make sure we're eating correctly. That sometimes I got to remind myself haven't eaten, so I've got to go eat because sometimes you get too busy and so I always say take care of yourself. Some personal there's you because there's a reason on the planes when they say to put the oxygen on yourself before you help others. You can't go help others. You can't be a good leader. You can't be a good business owner if you're not in the right position, right? Mentally, physically. So I encourage, to take care of yourself so that you can be the best at whatever it is that you're doing.
That's so true. And even as you mentioned, like early mornings, I really do. I do the same thing because I think it like sets the tone for your day. That when it's quiet, when at least in my mind, I feel like everybody else is sleeping.
Right. That's right.
It's like, wow, I'm being productive. But no, at the same time, I really do. I think before you start into the career right away, even starting your exercise, but just being one with yourself and kind of even reflecting on just not being so cliche, but the positive things in your life. What are you grateful for? And for me, that really does. Like, I'm so happy that you mentioned that because it lays a solid foundation for my day as far as even when we talk about like choices, like choosing that positive mindset, but really beginning a day just in quiet and in kind of like that inner like it provides me at least that sense of inner peace before
Yes.
my day gets going and then
Right.
everything starts like going from that point. But Ty, this has been an absolutely amazing podcast episode. If you could just round it out perhaps with a positive message or a positive quote for our community.
Well, I do want to tell you, do you remember in the story I said when I got the call, I had a 6 year old. The One of the coolest things ever was just a couple months ago, I was able to walk her down the aisle. And so I say that because whatever we're dealing with, whatever is in front of us, whatever wall, whatever size wall that is, it's worth the climb. I mean, and I can promise you, sometimes it doesn't look like we can get out of that ditch. But what I would encourage people to do is, we all have a story. Mine's no different than anybody else's. I would just say, go encourage your friends, your family, tell your story because you never know who that story is going to help. And that's what I realized when I went and told the story to at my wife's family reunion. So I encourage you to tell your story, and don't just dust it off. like I in my mind, that's what I thought we were to do. But I really think the world that we live in today, Courtney, is a tough place. And we need to put our arms around each other and help each other through it. And sometimes it's sharing our story. So I hope that's something that I would, by encouraging people today. I mean, I hope, it always, and I've told you this, if I'm helping one, it's worth every ounce of my day. Right. And I think by telling my story, I can help one, but I think you can too. I think each person out there can help one, and just think how amazing that would be, right? If we just started a domino effect of helping each other. Wow, what would this world look like? And it doesn't, we're not going to change it overnight. It's not going to be a one thing. And I always say it's the 1% rule, right? Do something little each day and you'll be amazed at what it looks like in a week, in a month, and in a year. So
Excellent advice, Ty. And I really do. I think it's so true as far as storytelling. We each have a story, but you never know when you're inspiring someone, when you're able to encourage them to maybe, if it is in career, to start something in your
right.
career. You never know by just even having a conversation. I feel like communication today is so important, and kind of more so than ever, especially with AI, with technology. But when we are able to share our story, if it's just with one person, just like you said, like you never know if you could just, if it is just impacting one person, you have done your job. Or if it's 500, 1,000, you never know. So excellent, excellent point to end this amazing podcast episode on. Ty, thank you so much for sharing your story and discussing just the journey in between. Like on paper, sometimes we could see the success, but then the journey that you have been able, like I said, just overcoming those challenges and how you have done it with an incredibly positive mindset is truly inspiring. So thank you once again, Ty.
You're so welcome, Courtney. Thank you. And again, you have great energy. And so please keep that up because it is contagious.
Thank you so much, Ty.